Now we have Lucy.
Little Johnny?
The people stories.
The people stories.
Didn't you have a song for this?
Oh, yeah. I had a Little Johnny song, right? Is that right?
Didn't you?
Yeah.
We did practice this.
Just want to make sure. Right? It's the only song I have is Little Johnny, so that's got to be the right one, right?
No, this is the people vignette.
The people.
People.
People, people, people.
My friend George took me to a joke tellers convention in Las Vegas. Believe it or not, I've been collecting and telling jokes since I was 8 years old. This is literally true. I'd never been to a joke tellers convention. We went in, sat down, had an audience, and there on the stage was a microphone. Coming up through the microphone was a line of people. The first one comes up and says, "I'm Ted, 1137. And there's polite laughter and little applause. Ted goes off. The next person comes up and says, "I'm Jane, 2193. There's laughter and there's polite applause. And I turned to George and I said, "What the hell is this?" And he says, "We know all the jokes. All of them. And this way, everybody gets, we've numbered them, everybody gets to tell a joke, everybody gets some laughter and some recognition. We save a heck of a lot of time." About that time, Frederick comes up and says, "I'm Frederick, 3722. There's polite laughter, there's polite applause, but way over here in the corner, there's this guy literally rolling on the floor laughing. He's laughing so hard he's turning purple." I said to George, "Okay, what's this?" He said, "Oh, he never heard that one before." And then, a few minutes later, Frank comes up. "I'm Frank, 1133. Dead silence. Not a word, not a sound. And I said to George, "What's with that?" And he said, "Oh, he never could tell a joke." There's there's two new businesses in town. They're opening up down on Rutherford Road. There's two brothers. One of them is a veterinarian and the other one is a taxidermist. They're practicing together and they've got this great big sign. One way or the other, you're getting your pet back. Ernie is a psychiatrist. Ernie is in his office one day and a new patient comes in and introduces himself and says, "I have a problem." And Ernie says, "Well, granted, most people who come to me have problems. What's yours?" And he says, "It's earwigs. Every morning I wake up and there's a different Tom Jones song running through my head. It stays there all day long. All day long. I can't eat, I can't sleep, I can't drink, I can't work. I keep hearing all these Tom Jones songs. Am I the only person who's afflicted like this?" Ernie's last words were, "It's not unusual." I was at the hospital the other day having a blood test, and I'm sitting in the hallway, and I hear bickering, really terrible bickering. This couple goes by, and the man is saying, "You're always pushing me around and talking behind my back." And his wife said, Dear, you're in a wheelchair. Two college professors are at a nudist colony, and they're sitting up on the veranda, and chairs a little bit like this, and they're sipping on their drinks, and one turns to the other and says, "Have you read Marx?" And the other one says, "Yes, I'm pretty sure it's The Wicker." This one is a bit longer. It's also one of my favorite stories. In a small Mississippi county, right in the center of the state, there's a county. It has one consolidated high school. They have a dropout problem. The principal calls in the entire student body and says, "We need to work on this dropout problem. How bad it is, this is Cletus. Cletus was our only graduate last year. All the rest dropped out. We need to do something about this. Let's start. Cletus is going to show you the value of a good education. Cletus, how much is 21 times 21? And again, more deer in the headlights. You could almost see the wheels meshing and the smoke coming out of his ear. And Cletus says, let me see, 21 times 21, that's 179, isn't it? The principal's shoulders slumped, and the crowd starts to get a little ugly about, you're just trying to embarrass him. The principal says, okay. Cletus, how much is 21 plus 21? More deer in the headlights. He says 21 plus 21. That's 53, I think. The crowd is really on the principal now. You're just trying to embarrass that good old boy. Come on, what are you trying to do? Make him look bad? The principal says, okay, Cletus, how much is 2 plus 2? Cletus's little eyes light up. 1, 2, 3, 4! And the entire student body rises to its feet and shouts with one voice, give him another chance. I haven't told the Feghoot yet. And this one isn't, but I'm working up to a couple of good Feghoots. I've got this old touring car that I drive around out in the back roads, principally in McDowell County and down in Rutherford County. I was driving along one day and I looked over to my left there in the farmyard. There's a 3-legged pig. And wanting to work on my innate shyness, I went up to the door and knocked on the door and said to the farmer, what's with that 3-legged pig over there? Mister, that's my good old pig. They don't make pigs like that no more. My good old pig, here about, 3 months ago, he saved the lives of my entire family. That there's a good old pig. God didn't make pigs no better than that. I said, what happened? I heard my pig out there squealing. I told you he's a good old pig, didn't I? I heard him out there squealing about 3 in the morning, and I thought a coyote done got after him. I went busting out back with my shotgun. The back of our house was on fire. That pig woke us up and saved our lives. And I said, is that how he lost his leg? No, mister. No, good old pig like that. You don't eat him but one leg at a time. Then a few months later, I ran into that farmer at the farmer's market. And I said, how's your good old 3-legged pig? So we done ate the other 3 legs. Now he's a groundhog. When I lived in West Virginia, I was driving home from the tavern late one night. It was the proverbial dark and stormy night, and I felt a thump on the right side of the car, and I looked around, it's dark and it was raining, I didn't think too much about it, and I went home, and in the morning, a state trooper and a sheriff's deputy showed up at my house with a warrant. I said, my God, what did I do? He said, you hit a farm animal. You hit a pig. You didn't kill him, but you hit him. And you are required by law to stop and render assistance. You failed to do so. You're going to jail. And I said, well, I did hit something, but how did you know that I did it? Oh, the pig squealed. Now we get into a Feghoot. A Feghoot is a short story with a terrible, a delicious pun ending. They are named after a character, Feghoot, who was written about by a guy with an odd English name that he disguised further by anagramming it. And I think it was something like Brierly. It doesn't make any difference. The stories, his Feghoots are not very good. I have not ever used one, and I never will. The frame of reference is very, very difficult for modern day Americans. These were written close to 100 years ago. But this is a Feghoot. I had to go to a funeral over the other side of the mountain the other day. My friend Tina Martinez was on the police force of this small town. She was a corporal. Roy, her husband, was a sergeant. Tina had passed the sergeant's test. There were no openings. She really wanted to be a sergeant. And then she was diagnosed with renal cell carcinoma, really one of the worst cancers you can get. She was on her deathbed. Everybody knew she was dying. She wanted to be a sergeant. So her husband resigned his sergeant's position, and they promoted her on her deathbed. I was there at the wake, and Roy said every morning we would come down to breakfast, and Tina would take rye bread and she'd toast it extra crisp, then dip it in her milk or tea and eat it. And every morning now, I look up and say to the heavens, "Dunk rye for me, Sergeant Tina." That's a Feghoot. But that's not the end of the story. Immediately thereafter, this lady stands up and says, "May I say a word?" He says, "Well, of course you can." She said, "Plethora," and sat down. And he said, "Thanks, that really means a lot." My friend Luke bought himself a new bass boat. It was a beautiful bass boat. He had that thing beautifully painted, and he christened it the 4th of July because that was the day he bought it. He called up his friend Opie and said, "She's in the water. Let's take her out. I've got the beer and the bait all ready." Opie says, "I can't go right now. I have to take my wife across town to her OB appointment." "So why are you going all the way across town? There's one right next door to you." The one across town is her cousin Juan. Juan is giving us free medical care for the duration of this pregnancy. And free is not to be scoffed at. Okay. So Luke is walking back and forth on the deck waiting. The wind starts to pick up, and the boat is rocking a good bit. It's still tied up. Opie comes driving in, grabs his fishing rod and says, let's go. Luke bent down to untie the painter and fell into the water with the boat rocking back and forth like this. And that's when Obi-Wan's kin Opie saved Luke from the dock side of the Forth. Another Feghoot that I think you'll enjoy. It's all of these things seem so sad. Alphonse Parade. You've probably never heard of him. Alphonse Parade was one of the great geneticists of the 21st century. How great was he? He bred a whole strain of swine that were hypoallergenic with respect to humans. They could transplant all the organs they wanted to, and there's absolutely zero rejection. Imagine what that would mean in the 21st century. It would be a miracle of miracles. But he went one further. He used his genetic engineering to create great big ones. They were 16 feet long, 8 feet wide. Each one had 10 hearts, 6 kidneys, and 2 livers. You could just harvest them, close them back up, and continue on. It was, like I said, a miracle. The genes had run amiss, though. Their breath was so foul that you couldn't get near them. They were also so big that normal humans couldn't cope with them in the labs. These things, they couldn't walk. They had to be turned and massaged and fed. So he developed, cloned, almost 100 gorillas that he trained to do this. Even the gorillas couldn't stand the bad breath, though. Parade was spending a fortune on breath mints so that the gorillas could get close enough to take care of these swine. Very valuable, very important swine. One day, Parade is in the lab, and one of the gorillas drops a bucket of breath mints. Parade makes a fatal mistake. He backhanded that gorilla, and the police report concluded that 76 strong clones fed the pig Parade with 110 chlorets close at hand. March 9th, 1916. Exactly 30 years to the day before I was born, as a matter of fact. Pancho Villa made a raid across the Mexican border into New Mexico, killed a few troops, killed a few civilians, and ducked back across the river. Blackjack Pershing was sent to catch him. He couldn't. Pershing says, what are we going to do? And one of his lieutenants said, you know what we can do? We can bring small naval gunboats up the Rio Grande, and we can shell their positions on the other side of the river. Well, Pancho Villa heard about this and called his lieutenants together and said, this is a threat that we hadn't anticipated. What are we going to do? One of his lieutenants, who knew a little bit more about naval affairs than did Pancho Villa himself, who was really just a bandit, said, why don't we take all of our garbage scows and go down and sink them at the mouth of the river, and that'll keep the gunboats from getting up. Villa sneered and said, barges? Barges? We don't need no sinking barges. Peggy, who is my beautiful bride right over there, and I were in a restaurant in Dublin, at a Chinese restaurant, and we were lingering over Hey, in England, that's the only decent food you can get is ethnic food. Don't laugh. It's true. The English food is terrible. The Irish food can be better, and I'll have a story later about that. We're sitting there over our appetizers, and the waiter comes out with a tureen, about that big around, and it's got this nice, beautiful lid, and he sits down between us and says, "It's your main course." And we're chatting and drinking our wine, and suddenly the edge of the lid lifts up about an inch, and these two beady little eyes stare out at us. And it closes, clink. What the hell's this? So a couple minutes later, it happened again. I called the server over and said, "Watch this." Sure enough, the lid edged up, these two beady little eyes peered out at us, and the lid clinked shut. The server looked at his list and said, "Oh no, you ordered the chicken surprise and they sent out Peking duck."